Talk.
Hello, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Congratulations, Geronimo Jajaga. I'm glad to see that you have been released, and I have a couple questions regarding COINTELPRO.
Okay.
I've been doing a little research on this myself, and it's just amazing how far their hand extended into not only the Black Panther Party, but just every civil rights organization and target in the 60s and 70s. Is there, in your opinion, now that you have been released, is there a continued reason why we as black people should be concerned, I'll use that term, about the possibility of COINTELPRO or COINTELPRO type programs still existing even in this day and age?
Okay.
Of course. I think that it still exists. I am trying to overcome this 27-year alienation and check things out so I can maybe answer that question better but from my standpoint right now, I think it still exists. And COINTELPRO was a program that comes under the title of psychological warfare. And you have biological warfare, which you deal with the AIDS and whatnot. Then you have chemical warfare, which you deal with the crack. And these are very real programs. I've been to Vietnam twice. I was in Santo Domingo. I've been through quite a few wars, and I've been studying wars for years. We are in a constant state of war, and I think it would behoove us to stay alert to these things. You see what's happening throughout our nation and the communities, and it would do us well to study and understand psychological warfare in its entirety.
More of your phone calls for Geronimo Jajaga and his attorney, Johnny Cochran. And when we return, we'll spend a full hour tonight, so we got another half hour left to go. So if you're trying to get through and the lines are busy, keep calling. If you're holding, do not fret. I promise to get to you. We're back in just a second, so stay with us.
Show me loose, I'll be.
Name, Geronimo, tonight via satellite from New York by his friend and longtime attorney. You all know Johnny Cochran, who needs no introduction. Before we go back to your phone calls, which I promise we'll get to in just a second, let me ask you, Geronimo, I had the pleasure of seeing you, and it was quite a moving experience, as I'm sure Johnny will attest, as will the 5,000 folks who saw you in New Orleans at the Essence Festival. And shame on the folks who couldn't get in. I know a lot of folks were upset they couldn't get in that room. But for the 5,000 standing around the walls who did see you, they saw you deliver your first public address in 27 years. I want to ask you what the feeling was like being in front of that podium, or behind the podium, I should say. And then I want to ask you a specific question about something you said there. But what was it like standing in front of all those beautiful black people speaking for the first time publicly in 27 years?
Man, it was exhilarating. I like shot back to the days of the 60s when we would have those kind of gatherings, and it was just so beautiful to see all those new African people there, and so beautiful, and hugging me, and it was like they did the time with me. And they did, because throughout the years, even the years in the hole, when they wouldn't even let me get letters, I knew letters were coming. I knew they were tearing them up. So through the spirit, their prayers, I mean, you could feel it. I went through hell and high water, but I always felt that my people were there, even in the lowest moment. So that night, when I went before them, like I said, I'm not a speaker. I'm from the Ministry of Defense. Who did the speaking was the Ministry of Information, Eldridge and Kathleen Cleaver and Bobby said, and so I wasn't comfortable with that, but their love just made me feel so at ease that I didn't even seem like I was having a public. It was like an old family reunion.
And a whole lot of family members were there.
I know.
Let me ask you specifically something you said in that address. I got the sense from listening to you, as did the audience, I'm sure, that you're not crazy about the way the prison system works. And there are a lot of us who aren't necessarily high on the way our prison system works. Many of us are ashamed of it, quite frankly. But I want to ask you specifically, as one who spent a good deal of time in prison, what do you not like about the prison system? And if you were in charge of Prisons USA, what changes would you make?
Well, prisons are a tool that's used by the ruling class or the powers that be to control the oppressor of the oppressor class. And that's understood all the way around the world. If you're in a certain class, you're not going to prison. I call myself a prison abolitionist, and in time, when we have more time, I plan to work that out and to put that out more further. John and I were talking about it the other day, and Stu Hanlon, who's been with me right there for over 25 years, you know, we're going to come up with some formulas and some proposals and some programs, hopefully, that may resolve this. It's not an easy problem to deal with.
Thomas, Geronimo has thought a lot about this, and he is going to be expounding more on it in the future. And one of the things, Tavis, if I could just add one thing.
Sure.
One of the things that Geronimo Giaga and I did on Saturday was we talked to a well-known congressperson in the United States Congress about the fact that we would like to see some actual hearings. One of the callers asked about COINTELPRO, whether or not it was still a viable force. And, you know, it's frightening to think that it could be, but you see, it depends on who is the unpopular group at the particular time. And we are calling upon the Congress and the appropriate committees to convene hearings and call witnesses. And let's get some answers with regard to the present status of COINTELPRO, how long has it been in existence, it is still in existence, who's being targeted at this point. And I think the American people certainly require and should demand some answers, and specifically the African American community should demand those answers.
I'm up against a break, Johnny, and I got to take it right quick, but let me ask you, from your perspective, and I'll get Geronimo's response a little bit later here, who do you blame, who do you hold responsible for this 27-year sentence that Geronimo had to suffer? Do you blame the government? Do you government vis-a-vis the FBI? Do you blame the DA's office in L.A.? Do you blame the officers? Do you blame Julio Butler? Who do you blame for what Geronimo's had to endure here?
I blame all of them. The prosecution team, from the FBI through the police department through the prosecution, they're all, it seems to me, part of that team that conspired to put this man away.
Let me take a break here. When we come back, I want to ask Geronimo specifically whether or not he feels bitter about what he's endured. If you watch him tonight, you certainly don't get any sense of that, and I certainly don't feel it sitting here across from him, but I'm wondering whether or not he feels embittered at all, and if he does, maybe he'll share with us a little bit of his emotional regard in that matter. So stay with us. We'll get more of your phone calls for Geronimo Giaga. I almost slipped and said Pratt, and his attorney, Johnny Cochran. We're back in just a second. Stay with us. You may know him as Geronimo Pratt, released after 27 years in prison for a crime he says he did not commit, said it 27 years ago, said it all while he was in prison, and is still saying it tonight. We're also joined by his co-counsel in this case and longtime friend Johnny Cochran, who first had this case 27 years ago and vowed he would not quit practicing law until he got this man who sits across from me tonight out of prison. You got to stop practicing, Johnny?
Nope. I'm re-energized now. So I feel young again. So
all right. That's right. Let me ask you, Geronimo, whether or not you're at all bitter. I'm sitting here across from you and had a chance, as I said earlier, to spend a little bit of time with you today, and I just don't get any bitterness from you, and I don't understand it, quite frankly.
Well, you would understand it if you understood that I'm a disciple of the elders. I've always listened to what the elders told me, and they instilled an ethic and a morality and a moral system in us that didn't allow for stuff like that, hatred, bitterness, and that when you join a movement like this, it's not you, it's the movement. So if you attack, you're just one person, you're expendable. The movement is what's more important. The struggle for liberation is more important. So I wasn't like taking it personal in that sense. Like you call me a murderer, you're calling the movement that I belong to a murderer. You're calling Kathleen Cleaver a liar who came from Algiers to testify and to corroborate my alibi. You're calling David Hilliard, Bobby Seale, Virginia Pratt, Imelda Pratt. I mean, everyone who with all kind of stature in the community. So it's bigger than me. It's, you know, so my bitterness is irrelevant.